Today we dig into another volume of terrifying wilderness stories from my podcast, Alone in the Woods, featuring allegedly true and terrifying accounts from those who encountered disturbing things in the great outdoors. What you're about to hear are episodes 77 and 78, which include stories about werewolves, skinwalkers on Navajo reservations, and more. If you enjoy these stories, you can follow and review Alone in the Woods on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or just subscribe here on YouTube. Send us your outdoor horror stories at darkstories.org. Heads up, Alone in the Woods is the only show I operate that utilizes my AI voice clone. Now, throw a log on the fire, because the night is still young. Shadow in the Woods, from Saber Squid HD. So this story takes place about 6 or 7 years ago, when I was about 14 or 15. I live in the mid-Michigan area, so nothing like the north with large forested areas, and not like southern Michigan with cities. But where this story takes place is somewhere in between, with some cities scattered out, and woods but mostly farmland and towns. For a little context to the story, I live in a trailer park off of a road about 2 miles from any town. So not too far, but a little out. There are 2 ditches that dip down off from the road adjacent to the park that is connected to the road. One ditch goes for about 50 yards, then stops to one entrance, then is cut by another entrance where the other ditch, which is bigger, starts. Now the other ditch starts narrow and slim, but opens to a decent-sized pond towards the back of the park. Now where the second larger ditch is, there is a strip of woods, as we called it, but it was really just a long trail with trees on either side that lead from the edge of the park to the road, about 200 or so yards long. Now my brother, when he was younger, lived out here with our grandma, and he has told me some scary stories about the woods and about things he's come across, from strange noises and things found in dirt to a human skull he dug up once. But I think that was just to try and frighten me. But he has told me of a shadow figure that lives in the woods. As he said, it's old native land, and could potentially be cursed. So now that you know the basic layout and some backstory, off to the main story. It was a warm autumn afternoon, cloudy and windy. Me and my friend Matthew, who I'll just call Matt, used to go outside a lot, and we always played these army games. We never really had any crazy guns or anything, nor money to get cool and fun toy guns, so we would just use our imagination and use sticks. He would always come over, and we would just roam the trailer park, which at the time didn't have many trailers. It was quite empty and had a lot of old, run-down trailers no one lived in, and they wouldn't get rid of them, so it made for quite the area to just run around and play war games. Now, if anyone reading this grew up similar, you know how hard it is to find a good stick to use. But once you do, it's treasured, and you do anything to keep it safe as to not break it. So one day, we decided we needed new guns, sticks. So we went around the park looking, with not much luck. And though it was windy outside, no branches or anything fell that were worth using, mostly too slim and prone to breaking. Now, I should say that this day in particular felt off, like a very subtle difference in the air, and it just seemed dark but sunny at the same time. Now it was cloudy this day, so it could have just been dark clouds. But I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt off and darker than usual. I had at this point already found a stick I liked and wanted to use, but Matt couldn't find one big enough, as he wanted to have one that resembled a machine gun. I always went with rifle-looking ones because they were the easiest, so he decided we go look in the woods to find him one. Now, we would never do this, mainly for the fact it was just too creepy in there, especially going alone, but also because the sticks in there were weird, and they were always too bumpy, big, or twisted. So we always looked around the park because there were more oak trees that had better ones that fell off during windy days. But today just wasn't the day for it, So we decided to go into the woods and look for some new sticks to use. Now on our way up, I remember feeling the air get heavy, almost like we weren't welcome there and that we were disturbing something. And as we entered, I noticed the wind pick up, and the trail is surrounded on either side with cottonwood trees, which aren't small but tall, thick trees. And with it being late fall, there weren't many leaves on them, so the wind made it all the more eerie with the treetops whistling above us. So we begin our walk on the trail through the woods, and we start scouting the ground, trying to find good sticks. Now, I never really touched them because I was too afraid of the bugs that were in the woods, like ticks and centipedes and whatnot, but Matt was all over them, picking up every stick he found and examining it to see if it was the right shape for what he wanted. I felt off during this. I hardly ever picked up any stick. I was just watching him, and I remember rushing him to find one so we could leave as soon as possible because I had the constant feeling of dread and that something was off, like we were being watched. At this point, we were about halfway into the woods, and we had come across a pile of sticks that Matt had stopped at and began digging through to find something he liked. A detail I forgot to mention is on this trail, about halfway and to the right, there was an island, as we called it. It was a detached part of land that was separated from the path that you could see through the trees on the one side, and where we were, you could see the whole one side of the island. Now, the island had a lot of branches and shrubs that made it hard to go through, and on these branches were sharp and hard needles. Not really needles, but they were sharp branches that poked off of each branch. As he is looking for a stick, we notice all the animals and birds around us suddenly stopped chirping and making noise, and we both noticed these low-hanging branches ahead of us moving violently, as if being shook by something or someone. That's when I heard it, the sound of leaves crunching in the distance, about 20 feet to my right. And as I look, I see, as clear as day, this hunched-over shadow figure. It wasn't see-through, but it was like a solid shadow with a clear hunchback, and its arms were out in front of it, and at the wrist, the hands were down like when an animal stands up and its paws just hang there. But I remember it was running fast, but its feet moved in like a tiptoe motion, and it was hurling through the trees and shrubs, moving as if they weren't there, not fazed by anything but its primal instinct to get us off its land. As I see it hurling towards us, I hit Matt on the shoulder and bolt out of there as fast as I can, yelling, "Run! Run!" and just leaving. Matt yells something behind me, but my adrenaline took over at this point, so I blocked out all noise and just focused on getting out of there. When we finally got out, what felt like forever, dodging every stump and branch on the way, I made it to a large tree and rested by it, where about 30 seconds later, Matthew followed, out of breath and mad because he was confused as to why I ran like that. So I told him what I saw, and he said he had stopped to take a breath about halfway and heard something running after us, and that he saw something chasing us, moving fast but slow at the same time. To this day, neither me nor him can tell what it was, but we know that the land we are on, at least in the woods anyway, is definitely cursed, to say the least, and something is there that doesn't like being bothered, nor likes when people enter its domain. I'm ready to tell my side of the story. From Hollow Whisper. I've been a Darkness Prevails listener for quite some time now. At first, it was merely the raw voice of the show's narrator, but after hearing every story one after the other for the last few years, it seemed to start hitting pretty close to home. I cut out music on my drives to work, on my lunch breaks, and while working alone, as well as cutting grass with my grandfather part-time for his small landscaping business, because I honestly preferred this show more. I even started forcing myself to fall asleep at night, listening to every episode uploaded to YouTube. no matter how uncomfortable I felt with every narration more taunting than the last. Simply as a crutch. A way to cope. Just something. Anything to stop me from having time for myself to think. I am Christian, for starters. And being strong in my beliefs, I refuse to resort to drugs as a way to numb myself. I have a drink every now and then on my worst days, but the most I've ever had at once was 4 beer-sized hard ciders. Alcohol has never been something I've cared for, other than getting a little buzz. That and the taste of Angry Orchard and Reds. I don't understand how one can get so consumed with the grip of substances that they let it change their lives. I just never fell into that lifestyle, I suppose. Anyway, as I said, I don't really care for the idea of substances as a coping tool. I simply deal with things my own way. If some things take longer, then that's just what it is. It'll just have to take longer. I've had anxieties and an eating disorder most of my life, if not all of it. My mother once told me that when I was 2 years old, she took me to a doctor she knew, personally, for some problems she noticed I had. The doctor said right away that I was so bad that she didn't have any doubts at all. She could see very strong telltale signs of anxiety just from the way I sat down and carried myself while we were in the checkup room. I've grown out of it, however, and I personally feel as healthy and happy as ever since I was a young child with nothing on my mind. But still, there are things that kind of haunt me to this day. Irrelevant at the moment, this is still vital to my story, as far as everything being tied together goes anyway. But some years ago, say 5 or 6 to be exact, we used to live in a simple double-wide on a small plot of pine woods that had 5 acres of property. I'll come back to this when I get to why it's important. The job that this story is in relation to is actually my old high school I used to attend. I was enrolled from 7th all the way up to graduation, and immediately I applied for the job. I had actually done some side favors and odd jobs at the school for teachers, and even my old guitar teacher whenever he'd come up and visit for a week for guitar studies for my class, or if he was judging at our talent shows, so getting a job there was easy enough. They didn't require a resume because they already knew that I'd be a good helping hand as well as a custodian. Nevertheless, I took the position. I mean, $1,600 a month before taxes wasn't bad in my book, considering I was fresh out of school with 0 qualifications whatsoever. Little did I know, this would be a major turning point into something I was certain couldn't possibly coexist with reality. At first, it was tough. I had a couple co-workers come and go, which honestly I was relieved, considering myself and the co-workers in question didn't really wind up in favor of each other. We did wind up with a manager, a pretty cool guy who was actually one of the school's custodians when I was a student. We were familiar, and I was thankful to not have someone uptight blaming me and putting me down over every little thing I messed up on when I wasn't even trained to begin with. So that was a sigh of relief. Time went on, and I got into a standard swing of things. I had the 7:30 to 4 shift. It worked out nicely even though I got my younger siblings to and from school since I worked there as a favor for my mother. I'd come in at 7:30, mop the nurse's office, check the bathrooms down the hallway I was specifically assigned, took out breakfast trash around 9, then directly take my first break with my new coworker, this one being a good friend of mine even after he was fired. I then would take lunch with him at 11:30, and since I never took my second break, my manager allowed me to use that time to take my siblings home at 3:15, since we only lived about 3 minutes from the school. That way I could stay on the clock and be able to leave on time at 4 to get my full 40 hours for the week. However, I didn't always get to work at 7:30, and I didn't always make an exact 30-minute lunch break. Both of these my manager was understanding and okay with, so long as I still made my 8-hour day and my 40-hour week. As I said, he's a pretty cool guy, and since I'm not the best at having a concept of time, this was helpful for me. Unfortunately, this was the ticket to my own downfall. Most of the time, I decided to just take my siblings home at 3:30 and stay home until afternoon traffic at the school cleared up. This way I could ensure those last 30 minutes, as well as the time I missed on lunch, and earlier that morning were made up with efficiency to get the trash, the bathrooms, and any floors mopped in the late afternoons when I'd come back, since no one was there, and it was easy for me, so I wasn't distracted, and my manager allowed it. I'd sometimes show up in between 6 to 9 p.m., pretty much whenever I felt like it, as long as I could be there in enough time to get everything done before the alarms were auto-activated at 10 p.m., as I was not certified to have access to the alarm code. It was quiet at first, I have to say, but it didn't stay that way in those afternoon hours. It started small in the beginning, bland, if you will. There were little insignificant knocks coming from the ceiling tiles in the classrooms. Knocks I'm honestly sure were really just a raccoon, or maybe rats in the ceiling that have made their home up there. I have heard pens drop. Unclosed closet doors slowly push themselves from the hinge in which they weren't fully seated into. Little stuff like that. But it got worse gradually by the month, I'd say, to the point where I'd go out into both parking lots on either side of the school, just to make sure I wasn't hearing the work of a fellow staff member or advisor that had decided to come in later in the day as I had. The first real activity I noticed was kind of unsettling. The toilets started flushing by themselves. Now, mind you, some of the toilets had sensors on them and flushed automatically anyway. But still, this is at night, when no one is there to activate them. You could say it was a fly that glided past the sensor to set it off, but that's not how they work. They sense a heat signature, I suppose. They sense when a person walks up, and when they leave and flushes after a person has left the stall, as to reduce risk of germs from COVID specifically. At any rate, my hallway didn't even have these sensors, as the school didn't have the budget to supply them in all restrooms. And regardless, we kept those bathrooms spotless. I'm talking bleached, wiped, scrubbed, and lemon-scented every morning and every night. We did every bit of what is allowed and considered safe for children to still enter the bathrooms after disinfection. Any flies we had in the bathrooms had either drowned trying to drink from the toilet or had simply perished mid-flight from the resting bleach and lemon concentrate we used on all the floors and porcelain. I just brushed it off. I mean, I was there by myself at night, with an hour or so worth of work left to do every time I came in. I didn't exactly have time to become an investigator before the alarms activated. Things got worse after a while. I started hearing running and giggling down the halls, and the echoes from it, as well as hallways, tend to do. I heard the screech of tennis shoes every once in a while, as if a kid were slowly jogging to their next class and scrubbed their shoe a little hard on the floor tile. Think of what an indoor basketball court sounds like, with the shoe screeches echoing in the whole gym. That's what it sounded like. Oftentimes, I'd see a classroom door open with the lights on with the faint noises of computer typing, a printer scanning, or sometimes the sound of book pages being flipped, only for me to enter to greet my fellow staff member, but instead find an empty room and everything fall dead silent. It went on like this for months until I just got over it and learned to adjust. I wasn't the only one to experience strange things, fortunately. Others, like myself, however, simply brushed it off. You see, our school was founded by a woman when my grandparents were children with the initials SC. First name S, last name C. As per community guidelines, I'll just continue using the initials for the sake of safety and location discretion. Nevertheless, whenever something weird or unexplainable happens at the school, the staff always laughs it off and says something like, "Yep, there goes the ghost of SC again." It's never looked into any further than noticing the occurrence, then going back to minding their own business. It's summertime now, and thankfully all we do during this time of year is wax the floors and take out the lunch trash for summer school for the first few weeks. Once their summer school is over, we just keep waxing the rest of the summer. Work usually gets done by quitting time, so there hasn't been a reason for me to come into work late. That and my siblings are off for summer, so that stops me from having to use my second break for taking them home. I know what I'll have to deal with when first semester rolls around again, and although I'm used to it, I still don't like the idea of having to expect it and wait for the weird to happen every night. Still, the job puts bread on the table and I can't think of an excuse good enough to quit yet, so I'm staying currently. It's a good job, and I love the fact that some of my favorite teachers from my student days are still there, and I've made special friendships with them. So that's pretty cool, and I'm happy with that fact. But that's not the end of my story. Remember earlier how I said that double wide I used to live in would be important later? Well, that part of the story is what I'm going to explain next. Have you ever had that feeling of déjà vu? Like you've been somewhere before? Or said that before? Well, I have that feeling all the time at work because of that old trailer. And I think the answer as to why I experience the things I experience while at work lies on that property. When we first moved in, I fell in love with the place. And I still do love it, despite moving out as well as the things that happened there. I mean, it was 10 minutes out of town, 5 acres of land, house covered by the pine rows, and neighbors close enough to help should anything happen. All while being a quick drive away from the nearest town, in which I live now, but still having the taste of a small countryside privacy. My mother would sometimes hear footsteps behind her. The atmosphere always felt heavy, like someone was right behind you, following a third-person camera view like a video game. You never felt alone in that house. It felt better leaving the bedroom doors open at night when we went to bed, instead of having them shut. That's what it felt like. I remember walking in the woods one night. Usually I don't do such things because of the feral hogs and coyote packs that patrolled around our property as well as the neighbors. But I had our pit bull we named Storm walking with me, so I felt protected. The neighbors next to us didn't live there anymore, but had given us permission to fish their pond and hunt their land. So I wandered into their property on my walk. I eventually made my way up to this small group of maybe 4 or 5 baby pine trees that were a little taller than me. They were growing through this thick holly bush with pointy leaves. I thought it looked pretty the way the pines and bushes had grown, so I reached out to touch the waxy leaves of the holly. Then something happened that made me stop dead in my tracks. I heard rustling, to which I had at first thought was simply a raccoon or armadillo, but the movements I heard didn't seem to match the way those animals would move, and coyotes, if cornered alone, would simply either run away or cower on the ground baring teeth and growling. It was dark, and I had a $5 flashlight on me, so I wasn't exactly packing much of what you'd call heat. I couldn't see through the bushes. Each leaf I'd shine the light on would simply turn into a shadow of the leaf behind it, and so on. I looked around and noticed my dog was missing. So naturally I calmed down. I'd figured it was just her. Until what happened next. The rustling continued, so I bent down and spread some of the holly bush open in an attempt to coax my dog out of going any deeper. But then I heard a growl. A vicious, ready-to-spill blood-type growl that was foam dripping and filled with adrenaline. And I at that moment recognized it to be my pity. But not in the holly in which I was digging in. It was further back. She was on the other side of the trees behind the bush I was trying to pry back. After I realized this, the rustling stiffened and got much more sharp in motion, like a terrified animal had been cornered by its predator. I stood up and slowly walked back, keeping the light focused on the cluster of holly and pine. Like a typical teenager would do, I slowly picked up a thick stick and underhand tossed it into the bush, my dog Storm still growling. As soon as I did, I heard the most god-awful, high-pitched scream I had ever heard. It sounded like a crowd cheering after their favorite soccer team made a score. But coming from one mouth, the best way I can describe it is it sounded like a crow mimicking the fry scream of a metal band vocalist in a dissonant, unintentional tone, while still making this long, continuous nail on a chalkboard-like screech. This thing just took off. But oddly enough, without any footsteps. It sounded like a giant bird made one powerful flap of its wings, and that was it. With the added sound of what sounded like someone slowly applying pressure to a large bag of dead leaves. As the thing made this one long screech, it at the same time made one wing flap, and as the screeching got further away, the slow crushing leaves sound got louder until my ears slowly grew to a ringing, and suddenly it was just over. I looked down, my ears still faintly ringing, to find my dog sitting squeezed between my legs, with her tail tucked and here head lowered, looking out on all sides she could to make sure we were okay. It didn't terrify me as much as it was unsettling. It just felt not okay. Fast forward some time, my mother was still experiencing things. My father one time teased her for seeing a supposed goatman while pulling down the driveway, at which my mother replied saying it wasn't a goatman, that it was just something in the woods that didn't look right, something that stared and ran off unlike a deer in headlights, which made me think of an occurrence a couple weeks beforehand when I was picking up my brother one night from work. He worked at a Mexican restaurant at the time, and his shift was pretty late. The place technically closed at 11 p.m., but since how the owners don't like to be assertive with their customers, it'd sometimes be past 2 a.m. when he'd finally come out to where I was parked. That night he came out around 1:40-ish, if I remember correctly. It took us around 10 minutes to get through town traffic, and another 10 minutes to make it up the highway home. We had already gotten over halfway there when I saw what I'm still hoping to this day was just a strange dog. We went around a curve on the old country road to our house, and out of nowhere this skinny cat-like dog just jumps in one high leap, stretching its whole body mid-jump across the road and disappears into pitch-black night. If you've ever seen what a skinned lynx looks like, then that's how the thing looked, except with barely any head to speak of. It looked as if, though it was just an extra long neck, maybe a foot or so long, that hung low on the thing, with nothing but a stub at the end, where the skull meets the spine of a skeleton. It had grayish-white fur that was long and shaggy, like a winter-dwelling animal. But in the middle of late summer? Hints as to why I'm sitting on this, hopefully just being a weird dog. And finally, the part that ties the house in with my work experiences. When we first moved in, I also started having these strange reoccurring dreams, all featuring the same little girl, and they're always in black and white, with a subtle, not abrasive strobe light-like effect. Always. Once, she was slowly waltzing and dancing up to me in my room while I was paralyzed lying on my bed. Once where she looked a little older, and holding on the wall in the corner, where the walls meet the ceiling, staring down at me with black eyes and sunken in mouth and nose. And once where she had taken an appearance as a necromorph, with limbs stretching and contorting in all corners of my room, slowly lowering her face down to mine, with her jaw hung open with long, straight, unnatural snake-like fangs in rows of her gums. Until one day, they just stopped. We moved in with our grandparents, which is the house we live in now, to help out my grandfather with recent heart surgery. I've had the dream twice since we moved in, but that was more than 3 years ago. Come to find out from my mother, the reason the neighbors at our old house didn't live there anymore is because the original owner had lost his wife in that house in her sleep. He since packed up and left because he saw no more reason to stay. I can't help but feel that little girl in my dreams was that woman that passed. I'll never know. But the reason I say this ties into my work experiences is because along with the footsteps and the shoe screeches I hear down the halls, coupled with typing, book pages, toilets, and everything else, I also occasionally hear a very hollowed and specifically toned laugh of a little girl. The same laugh, the same exact laugh of the little girl in my dreams. It terrifies me. It disturbs me when I think about it. And because of my anxieties and low self-esteem, I often get into a state of depression and hopelessness when I have time to sit and think, which is why instead I keep myself busy by watching TV, watching guitar review videos, watching fly fishing videos, and how to tie my own fly lures, as well as listening to these episodes in my truck while driving just to stop my mind from wandering. I don't take anxiety medicine anymore, and I don't need assistance with my eating disorder, as now I can freely eat like a pig without feeling sick and nauseated without the aid of a pill. I hate feeling dependent on something, especially medicine. I don't think I have depression. I just have my moments and the occasional spells that are a bit of an inconvenience. I don't know if keeping my mind distracted is actually helping, or if I'm simply bottling it up and hiding from my emotions. Nevertheless, I'm doing okay. I just got engaged to the love of my life a few days ago. We went to this same school together before graduation. I love her to pieces. I love my family, and they've never done me wrong. I've got a lot I don't deserve and a lot to be grateful for. I'm happy with my life right now. I literally spent over 2.5 hours trying to type this and remember chronological occurrences. So I hope getting this off my chest was somewhat appreciated. Thank you for your time. Hopefully things will continue to get better since I've left that house. That was not an animal. From Pumpkin Mama 2022. This is by far the most pure primal terror I have ever felt in my life. I have had my fair share of paranormal experiences, but this was the first time that I truly felt that my life was in danger. I love the woods, always have. So when the winter weather took a brief break, my husband and I decided to go on a little weekend trip up in the mountains, just the two of us. Our 3 young daughters were thrilled at the opportunity to have a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's house too. So my husband, I'll call him Peter for the sake of this story, packed our bags, gave our girls a kiss and hug goodbye as they made a stampede for Grandma and Grandpa's backyard swing set, and we hit the road. It was a beautiful drive out to where we'd be staying. Hubby did an amazing job of finding a last-minute rental cabin, and boy, did he pick a good one. The place was absolutely gorgeous, not just in mountain view, but the whole house. The place was huge, probably a bit too much for just 2 people, but hey, what's the harm in living it up once in a while? We spent the first evening there, enjoying homemade pina coladas in the hot tub. It was wonderful. The next day, we planned to spend the day in the woods. We packed our gear and set off into the gorgeous mist-blanketed forest. The first several hours were amazing, like something straight out of a cliché but romantic movie of puppy love that my husband and I hadn't experienced in quite a while. Dates and quality time aren't always easy when you have 3 little ones. We packed a picnic lunch and ate it on a big fallen log, spent some time quietly watching a group of deer and competing for who could spot the most different kinds of birds. These are all memories that I still very much hold dear. But after nightfall, well, I prefer to try and block out that part. The sun was setting, and we were making our way back to our cabin. It wasn't hard. We'd stayed on pre-carved trails and were armed with a map that the folks who rented us the cabin left for us. But soon into our trek, I began to get a bad feeling. I felt like we were being watched, followed even. It was subtle at first, twigs snapping just out of reach of our headlamps and flashlights and the like. But soon, I began to notice the forest going quiet, a well-known red flag to anyone who has spent any time in the great outdoors. My husband sensed it too, I could tell, as we both picked up the pace. Soon the subtle snapping sounds turned into heavier, more deliberate footsteps that kept time with ours. But these footsteps did not sound like what you'd expect to hear in the woods, like a deer or a bear or even a cougar. No, these were too similar to ours, bipedal. The footfalls sounded deliberately loud, like whatever it was perfectly capable of being silent, but wanted us to know it was there. Our walk turned into a speed walk, which turned into a jog, which turned into a run, and whatever was out there sped up right along with us. We were abruptly stopped in our tracks by an entire freaking tree falling across the path, mere feet in front of us. Peter and I shared a horrified look and slowly turned to look into the woods. We couldn't see much thanks to the underbrush, but we could vaguely make out a crouched shape watching us from behind what was left of the fallen tree's stump. The shape was that of a human, but something was very wrong. Its posture was just too tightly crouched, almost contorted, on its haunches like a puma, and the eyes, oh, those eyes. Shining in the beam of our flashlights were two bright red eyes that stared us down, blinking slowly, as if daring us to make a move. Then a sound began to emanate from the creature, a throaty, sort of trilling-like deep growl that reminded me of a Jurassic Park velociraptor, along with the chuffing of a tiger. It was at that moment that I felt true terror. I felt like an antelope on one of those nature documentaries, face to face with a lioness, knowing its chances were not good. Finally, this thing began to stand up on two legs, looking more like a human than ever now, which heightened my fear even more. Something was very wrong here. It looked like a woman with a mane of long, fluffy hair framing its head as it cocked it at us. Then it, or she, took a step forward. And that was it. Fight or flight kicked in, and my husband and I threw ourselves over the fallen tree trunk and ran for our lives. That monster gave chase, jogging alongside us as if we were barely moving at all, before moving out ahead of us and, to our horror, blocking our path again. I grabbed my husband's hand tightly, honestly thinking that this was the end, that we were going to die out here at the hands of that thing. I couldn't help the tears that ran down my face, and I could faintly hear Peter sobbing softly too. I will never forget the wicked, sharp-toothed smile that spread across this thing's face as it stared me in the eyes, toying with us, seeming to relish in our terror. In the next moment, it was like our minds synced up because, without a single word, we made a break for it, a last-ditch effort to get away and make it home to our daughters. We went around the figure on either side before joining hands again and running and praying as hard as we could. The sounds of pursuit and almost bird-like squawks and growls were right on our tails until we finally saw the light of the cabin and burst through the tree line. She stopped chasing us then. I could not resist a glance back, and I saw the figure turn and walk back into the woods. But why? She had us. I know she did. Why did this monster, perfectly capable of ending us both in one quick motion, let us go? Needless to say, we packed up and headed for home that very night. We discussed theories and thanked the Lord for our survival all the way home. We never did figure it out for sure why we were spared. We did, however, officially dub the creature a she though. Maybe we had exited her territory. Maybe we just looked like we tasted bad. Who the heck knows? But I don't really care why. We made it home to hug our daughters, and that was all that mattered to me. But still, the question lingers in our minds and comes up in conversation almost daily. Who or what was our guest in the woods that night? Many theories have been thrown around by friends and family we've told. A skinwalker, perhaps. Wendigo? Maybe a vampire? No idea. But I will leave you with this. Please be careful in the woods at night. What the daylight makes a fairy tale, the darkness can turn into a nightmare. I befriended a skinwalker. From Mulium. I know, this isn't really the story you're used to hearing on this channel, but I figured I could share this. The title of this story is crazy enough, and most people don't believe me when I tell them I have a skinwalker friend. But it's worth a shot, right? I was around 12 years old when this story began. I lived on a huge farm that had about 5 to 10 acres of just woods. I was an only child, and by myself for most of my childhood. Ever since my grandfather died, my family has been busy keeping their lives up, leaving me to fall in the background. So I spent my time either on my swings or in the woods. I love the woods. It's always a safe haven for me. There was this spot I'd always go to. It was a spot in the woods where a beautiful tree arch presented this sandy, small creek. It was small, but it was powerful, and deep enough for me to swim in the summer. I always spent my time there since I was alone and had nothing better to do. It was where I would go to feel safe. But one day, that changed. I was at my spot one afternoon after school, just looking for lizards to catch, when I heard a very loud thrashing through the thick brush to my right. Looking over, I could see the bushes and leaves shaking like something big was running through. Something like a bear. I've never seen a bear where I lived, but I never believed they weren't there either. But then, the bushes stopped shaking, and I heard a sheep bleat. There wasn't any sheep or goats in my neighborhood. None of the neighboring ranches had sheep or goats, just cows, horses, and occasional pigs and chickens. I stared, confused, before I felt a sudden wave of dread wash over me. I feel as if I'm in danger, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run back to my house. But I didn't. I was curious. I crouched behind the tree beside me and watched the bushes, wanting to see if this was an actual sheep. About 5 minutes later, a creature walks out of the bushes. It's tall, lanky, with dirty white fur and long, bony hands. It was skin and bones and had bright blue eyes that looked human. It looked around, letting out another sheep bleat, but it sounded more distorted, like it had blood in its lungs. I was in shock, staring at this thing as it limped and hobbled around, heading down towards the creek. I tried to move forward to get a better look, but a twig snapped under my shoe, exposing my position. The creature snapped its head over towards me, instantly making eye contact with me. I stared, and it stared back. Then, it let out a mix of a scream and sheep bleat, charging towards me. I hightailed it out of there, running through thick woods with the thing right behind me. Soon, it must have given up, because when I got out of the woods and turned back, it was gone. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I was scared, confused, and intrigued by what I saw. After a few days of research, I came to the conclusion that what I saw was a skinwalker. The thing kept coming back, taking the forms of some of my horses, my dogs, and even mimicking my parents. Sometimes I'd even see the thing watching me from my bedroom window, just staring at me through the trees before retreating to the darkness. It intrigued me. Yet all the time this was occurring, I never went into the woods, still wanting to be cautious. After a few weeks of these occurrences, the thing quieted down, and I never saw it again. I soon forgot about it and started going back into the woods again. After packing a barbecue sandwich, a bag of jerky, and a bottle of water, I set out to my spot in the woods to have a picnic with myself. I did this often, as I liked to be outside more than inside. As I was sitting at my spot, eating my sandwich, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Something was watching me. I turned and saw the same pair of blue eyes staring at me from across the creek. I stared, and it stared back. It was submerged in the brush, but I could see enough of it to conclude that it was starving. I could see the bony and shaky arms supporting it as it crouched down to keep itself as hidden as possible. Feeling sorry for some reason, I stood up and tossed my barbecue sandwich across the creek. I watched as it landed in the bushes, and the creature turned its attention towards it before disappearing. I stared for a bit longer before turning and walking away towards the house, leaving the rest of my food behind. The next day, I went back to retrieve my lunchbox, only to see it being ripped up. All the food I had was gone, and the containers they were in were destroyed. Huge hooved prints were in the sand, marking the creature as being the culprit for ruining my things. Instead of being mad or disappointed, I felt satisfaction, knowing that I at least helped whatever this was, soothe some of the hunger it had. Time skipped to a few weeks, and our farm is hit by a bad storm. It was horrible. Small trees being knocked down, our neighbor's pond almost overflowing, and my trampoline going from our backyard to our front yard. Our farm was a mess, but the woods were even worse. I couldn't even walk straight without getting hit by bent trees and tripping on fallen branches. I saw a dead raccoon that was crushed under a fallen branch, and an injured deer limping its way across the woods. I felt concern and fear, feeling bad for all the creatures, but I mainly felt worry. What if that thing was hurt? I know it's weird to worry about a monster, but I was young and didn't have anyone else. I spent the rest of the day clearing out the path I take to the creek and keeping an eye out for the Skinwalker, but I never saw it. My worry grew and grew as days went by, and I could never find it or even a trace of it. Usually, there would be turned up grass, large scratch marks in the trees, or the strips of white fur stuck on low branches, but there was nothing. After about a week, I was out in the woods doing my usual walk around when I heard a sharp cry. It sounded like a woman screaming in agony and a very off pig squeal. I immediately felt that sense of dread, and I knew it was who I was looking for. Walking towards the sound, I came over the massive creature struggling under a giant fallen branch. It was bleeding, its limbs bending in wrong directions as it clawed at the ground, frantically trying to get free. My heart ached for some reason, and I felt the overwhelming urge to help this creature. So, trying to stay out of its sight, I crept down to the thing, looking at the situation. It was doing a pretty good job at getting free. There was just one of its legs that was caught under the branch. So, trying my hardest, I attempted to lift the heavy branch to free it. I've always been stronger than most kids my age, lifting 2 50-pound horse feed bags with little struggle. So I was able to lift the branch enough for the creature to slide its leg out. It immediately dashed forward, turning around and making eye contact with me. It stared, tilting its head to the side as if intrigued by me. It had taken on the form of a white dog, yet it was too skinny, janky, and unnatural to be one. It was like if a very tall and long-limbed person put on dirty dog skin and a dog mask and tried to mimic one, doing a bad job at it. And still, it was skinny, ribs poking out of its sides, its spine visible as well as its hip bones. I kept eye contact with it, my eyes never leaving its as I took off my hiking bag and pulled out the small steak I had planned to cook at my spot. I tossed it over to the creature, and it immediately dove for it, eating it in 2 bites. Looking back at me, the thing took a few steps forward. I stood still, my body freezing as it fought between running and staying there to see what would happen. The creature continued to walk towards me before coming to a stop only a mere few feet away from me. It smelled of rotten flesh and horrible body odor, and I resisted the urge to vomit. I met those unnatural blue eyes, having to crane my neck back. This thing was 8 to 10 feet tall, so looking up at it was a bit of a challenge for my shorter self. We stared at each other for a good minute before the thing just turned and limped away, disappearing into the woods. Ever since then, I've seen it almost every day. When I would make a fire at my spot, it would be across the creek, listening to me as I talked to it. When I would be outside with my horses, it would watch me from the woods as if making sure I was all right. When I was hanging out with my friends in my room, I would see it wandering around in my pastures outside, occasionally looking at me with those unnatural blue eyes, which I have grown to find almost comforting. I would tell it about my life, my days at school, my grandfather, and vent to it. I felt comfortable with it, and I still don't know why. It even took the forms of my grandfather and would say things he always would say like, "I love you, Boo." Even though his voice was more distorted and raspy, I found it to be a great comfort. I would sneak leftovers from our family dinners and toss them out to the woods for the creature to get, always wanting to make sure it stayed fed. There was one point that I even touched it, my hand grazing its dirty, matted fur as it approached me. It felt greasy, like how your hands would feel after petting a dog or horse, kind of grimy. Never once has it tried to harm me, only studying me or attempting to comfort me. It would bring me gifts, leaving bones, rocks, and small dead animals on the porch under my window. I had even named it Odie. No, we never had a relationship like a man and dog would, but we had a strong bond. My friends told me I had a supernatural talent for being able to understand and tame cryptids and monsters. Let me tell you, I haven't and never will tame this creature. It is wild, dangerous, and no force will break that. I am simply a friend, not an owner. Only one other person has seen Odie, my cousin who saw it while we were out playing in the woods. She was terrified, refusing to go back into the woods from the fear of seeing such an ungodly creature. I didn't mind, however, because I felt no fear while being in the presence of Odie. Deep down, I knew it wasn't going to hurt me. I have moved twice, both to places with a heavily wooded area, either on or neighboring my house, and it followed me, always peeking at me from between the trees. Where I am now, I saw it looking at me through my window. It was a rainy day, so its fur was stuck to its body, making it look more unnatural. It stared at me for a while before turning and running on 2 legs back into the woods. Every now and then, I will hear small knocks on my window and on the door that leads outside to the small porch connecting to my bedroom. I know Odie is still out there, and it makes me more at ease when I hear those knocks, knowing that my shape-shifting friend is okay. Some may believe my story, some may not. I don't really care who does and doesn't. It's hard to believe, especially with all the other stories of this creature being hostile and dangerous. I just hope this story can be shared with other people to show them that not all dangerous and unnatural creatures are hostile. Some can be gentle, kind almost. Some like Odie, who will always have a special place in my heart, a friend who was there when no one else was. I give a special thanks to my Skinwalker friend, and to whatever the hell is wrong. God blessed me with being able to be welcomed into the presence and survive such an extraordinary creature. My Valentine's Day Fear. From Literally Traumatic. This story takes place on Valentine's Day of 2019. I had liked a girl for a while, and I had finally decided to ask her out the night before Valentine's Day. Looking back, it was a rash decision, but I was desperate. All my friends had their girlfriends while I was single, and they were putting a lot of pressure on me. The girl I asked out was named Sandra. I had known her for a little bit, and she seemed nice enough, so I made my decision and asked her out. She accepted, and I was happy. It was going to be my first Valentine's Day not single, and it was almost my last alive. I arrived at her house in the evening. I had never been there, but my first impression was not great. I could walk there since we didn't live that far apart. So when I started looking for her house number, I was shocked to see the one she lived in. It was an old, worn-down house. Pretty creepy in general. I'd seen it before because my friends and I had walked by and made fun of it before. I started having my regrets before Sandra came out to meet me. We greeted each other, and I awkwardly gave her the chocolate my parents made me bring. After that, we went inside. I have to say that the house was better on the inside, but it still wasn't my cup of tea. Her parents barely acknowledged us. They said they were going up to their room to watch a movie, and that we could do whatever as long as we made smart decisions. We kind of just awkwardly talked for a bit, until she invited me up into her room to show me something. I did as she said, and when we got into her room, she pulled out a Ouija board and said we should play. My family's pretty religious, and they'd told me before that they would be mad if I played it. Additionally, I really wasn't into that stuff and didn't feel like messing with it, so I respectfully declined. She seemed a little irritated and tried again to encourage me, but I once again declined. She looked angry for a second, then told me it was fine. We went back downstairs, and she almost immediately suggested that we go on a walk. I agreed in a confused manner. This was starting to get strange, but I still was going with it. She told me to wait outside while she grabbed something. Looking back, I should have thought it was strange that she was going to grab something for a short walk, but at the time, I brushed it off. She returned a few minutes later, and we began our walk. She told me that we were going to go on one of her favorite routes, and we turned into the wilderness. I thought we would turn back at some point, but the forest just got thicker and thicker. The sun was already in the process of setting when we left, but now it was almost completely dark. I asked her if we should go back because it was dark, but she insisted it was just a little further. Finally, we arrived at a clearing with a bridge that I had never seen before. It was about 30 to 40 feet above a big rock ditch. The barrier was a little lower than I normally would like, but I still felt comfortable leaning over it. Suddenly, she put her hand on my back gently. I had never been in a relationship before, but it felt normal enough. Her hand stayed there for a few seconds before I felt it strongly thrust into my back. I thought quickly and braced myself on the barrier. If I hadn't reacted as fast as I did, I'd be falling into a pit of rocks to my death. I pushed her arm away and asked her what she was thinking, and told her that I could have died, but she showed no emotion. Instead, she pulled out a kitchen knife that appeared to be held at the top of her yoga pants and hidden by her sweatshirt. She charged at me. I blocked her arm and asked her what she was doing. She started muttering stuff about the fact that he wanted blood and that I had disrespected him back in the house when I didn't play the Ouija board. I asked who he was, and she started telling me that she had seen him ever since she moved into the house and that they communicated through the board. I was confused and honestly kind of scared. She took advantage of my shock and slid past my arm that was blocking her and slashed my side. It was nothing lethal, but it still hurt, and I was bleeding. I winced in pain and instinctually reacted by smacking the knife out of her hand and pushing her to the ground. After that, I ran. It took me a little bit to navigate through the woods, but once I got into a populated area, I found my way home. My adrenaline ran out, and I collapsed the moment I entered my house. My parents were horrified. While they called 911, I told them what happened. In the end, my parents sued for assault. The case was easily won because of the evidence stacked up against Sandra by me, and the fact that they had run some tests on the blade that was used to slash me. In the end, Sandra and her family packed up and moved out of town because the story had gotten out. I've cut off all contact with her, and I'm glad for it. I recently discovered this channel, and with Valentine's Day coming up, I thought it would be a good chance to share. In the end, the lesson this story shows me is that when you're making a choice, you need to be sure that it's the right one, because if it isn't, things can end badly. Road of Death. From ADNS. This happened when I was maybe 10, and I was alone in the woods, which looking back wasn't the best place for a lone 10-year-old. I was exploring a particularly old part close to where I lived, where there used to be a Confederate field hospital. It was about 10:35, and I was going on the road where the hospital used to be when my dog started barking. That would be normal for most dogs, except I hadn't heard her bark once since I got her 2 months ago. I felt uneasy but kept going down the winding road. I finally approached the exact place where it used to be, and that's when it started getting weird. I heard the soft crunching of footsteps behind me and turned my flashlight in the direction of the sound. I at first thought it was a deer, but as I looked, there were no animals in sight. I was panicking at this point, and my flashlight was bobbing up and down as I ran away from that area. As I was running, I saw grayish cloth in the woods wrapped around something partially underground, and following my judgment, I didn't take a closer look. I was about 3/4 of the way down the road when my heart stopped. In the woods, almost completely covered with dirt, I could make out the eye sockets of what looked like a human skull, sitting in the ground, staring up at me. This is where I ran full sprint back to the main road and never set foot there again. Thank you for listening to my story, and don't forget, if you ever come across human bones, it's best not to mess with them. Clicking in the Woods. From Franny Barber. To start, I have a deep belief in the paranormal, but I also pride myself on being logical, grounded. I've successfully completed both the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail alone. I don't scare easily. That's why what happened to me today still doesn't make sense. I had the day off and decided to take on a long but manageable hike. 12 miles through Jennings State Forest in northern Florida. The Pioneer Trail. I had hiked it before. I knew the route. The first hour and a half was peaceful. The air was crisp, the woods alive with sound, birds singing, frogs croaking. I passed only one other person, exchanging a brief nod before I was alone again. At about 5 miles in, I reached the river where the trail runs alongside the water. I sat there for a while, just listening, breathing, taking it all in. Everything felt normal. Then I climbed the small foothill just beyond the river. And that's when it happened. A sound clicking, soft rhythmic tongue clicking, coming from all around me. I froze. The forest, once buzzing with life, had gone completely silent. No birds, no frogs, no rustling of leaves, just the clicking, growing louder, closer. I scanned my surroundings. Nothing. The trees were dense, the shadows deep, but I saw no movement, no animals, no people. Still, I felt it, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. A chill crept over me, but I forced myself to shake it off. I wasn't one to jump at shadows. Then the clicking stopped. I exhaled, adjusted my pack, checked my firearm at my side, and kept walking. That was my mistake. About 100 yards later, I realized something was wrong. The air felt heavier, thick like humidity before a storm. But the sky was clear. The trees didn't look right either, their trunks seeming taller, stretched, like their proportions had warped in subtle, sickening ways. The path beneath my feet changed. I knew this trail, but suddenly it was unfamiliar. The ground sloping in directions it hadn't before. The roots gnarled in patterns that made my stomach turn. I took another step, and the soil gave under my boot with a soft, wet squelch. The smell hit me then. Rot. Not the usual damp earth and decomposing leaves, but something else. Something rancid. It was the unmistakable stench of decay, thick and suffocating, as if something had been left to fester in the heat for days. I gagged, covering my nose, but the second I did, the clicking started again. Louder. This time it wasn't just one sound, but many, overlapping, layering on top of each other. Some were slow and deliberate, others rapid and frantic, as if dozens of mouths were trying to mimic the same noise in chaotic unison. My vision blurred. A wave of disorientation slammed into me so hard I stumbled forward, knees nearly buckling. The world shimmered, like a heat mirage, the trees bending, twisting in ways that defied logic. My pulse pounded. I reached for my gun, but with my left hand. I never use my left hand for anything. My right arm hung limp at my side, as if it had forgotten how to respond. A primal fear settled deep in my gut. Something was wrong with me. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to see this. And then, out of the corner of my eye, movement. A shadow detached itself from the trees. Too fluid, too smooth. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs bending at unnatural angles, its joints too many, too sharp. It wasn't walking, it was gliding. The clicking grew deafening, drilling into my skull. The thing didn't have a face, or rather, it had too many, features shifting, flickering like an old film reel, each face appearing for only a split second before morphing into another. A woman's mouth, a man's eyes, a child's grin, then nothing at all. I tried to move, but my body refused to respond. My limbs felt heavy, my breath shallow, my thoughts sluggish. Then it turned its head toward me, and I ran. I don't remember making the decision to flee, only the sheer primal need to escape. My body moved on instinct, tearing through the undergrowth, tripping, stumbling. The air felt wrong around me, thick and syrupy, like I was running through water. Behind me, the clicking followed. Closer, too close. Branches snapped, trees groaned, the sound of something enormous moving just beyond the edges of my vision. Then a whisper. Not in my ears, but inside my head. "Stop running!" It wasn't a request. It was a command. A sickening, creeping compulsion wrapped around my mind like a vice. My legs slowed against my will. My breath hitched. My vision darkened at the edges. I felt something cold, wet, press against the back of my neck. And then the world snapped back. The clicking was gone. I stumbled, nearly collapsing onto the trail. The air was light again. The trees were normal. The sun shone through. The canopy as if nothing had happened. I looked behind me. Nothing. Just the empty forest, untouched, undisturbed. But the feeling remained, a gnawing, suffocating dread deep in my bones, a certainty something had been there. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Even then, I kept checking the trees, waiting, expecting to see something standing at the edge of the forest, watching. Nothing was there. But as I sat in my car, hands trembling, breath coming in shallow gasps, I realized something. I could still hear it, faint, just beneath the sound of the wind. Clicking, soft, patient, waiting. I turned on the engine and peeled out of there, heart hammering, pulse deafening in my ears. I don't know what I walked into on that trail. I don't know what I heard or why it felt like I was being watched, hunted. In all my years of exploring the woods, nothing has ever unsettled me this deeply. To say the least, I won't be setting foot in Jennings State Forest alone again. Maybe not ever. My Skinwalker encounter. From James 54. There are some things that you hear about growing up. Stories told around campfires. Whispers that linger in the back of your mind. You know the kind. The ones that leave you with a chill up your spine. But you push them aside because, well, who believes in things like that, right? I never thought I would be one of those people. The ones who swear they've seen something they can't explain. But that night, out in the desert, I became one of them. It was supposed to be just another weekend getaway, with a few friends. We were camping on the edge of Navajo land, far from the hustle of the city. The air was dry, the stars were bright, and the world felt peaceful. Too peaceful, as I'd come to realize. We'd heard the stories, sure, about skinwalkers, the shape-shifting creatures that are said to roam the desert, taking on the forms of animals or even people. But, like most people, we just chalked it up to local folklore, nothing more than cautionary tales to scare tourists. That night, however, everything changed. The air went still, almost suffocatingly so, and the sounds of the desert seemed to vanish into an unsettling silence. The crickets stopped chirping. The wind died down. The only noise was the crackling of the fire we were sitting around. I felt it before I saw it, the heavy weight of something watching us. Something wrong. At first, we all tried to shake it off, but then we heard it. A sound, a low, distant growl. It almost sounded like a coyote, but something was off. It wasn't the usual howl you'd expect in the desert. It was deeper, almost distorted, like it was trying to mimic something human, but wasn't quite getting it right. I thought maybe it was just a coyote, maybe a mountain lion. But as the sound grew closer, I knew it wasn't either of those. Jake, being the brave, or maybe foolish one, decided he'd go take a look. I begged him not to, but he shrugged it off, saying he'd be back in 5 minutes. So he set off into the darkness, his flashlight cutting through the blackness. The rest of us stayed by the fire, uneasy but trying to act like everything was fine. But as the minutes dragged on, I began to feel a deep sense of dread creeping in. Then we heard Jake. His voice, strained and full of panic, echoed across the desert. "James, you need to come now!" His words were sharp and terrified, and there was no mistaking the urgency in his voice. We grabbed our flashlights and ran toward him, my heart racing. I don't think I fully realized how scared I was until we reached the spot where Jake had been standing just moments before. He was frozen, wide-eyed, and pale. His face was like a ghost's, and he didn't speak at first. He just pointed into the dark, his finger trembling. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It was something else, he stammered. We looked in the direction he was pointing, and at first I didn't see anything. But then it appeared. At first, I thought it was just the shadows playing tricks, but no. There, standing among the scrub and dust, was a figure. It was tall, too tall, much taller than a normal person. The first thing that hit me was how its limbs seemed all wrong. They were unnaturally long and thin, stretching at impossible angles. Its arms hung low, brushing the ground like the arms of some twisted creature, almost like it had been designed to move in a way that didn't belong on Earth. But the most horrifying part was its face. I wish I could say I didn't look at it, that I turned away or tried to block it out, but I couldn't. Its face, if you could even call it that, was stretched and pulled tight over something not human. The skin was pale, almost translucent, like it was stretched over bone. There were no distinguishing features like eyes or a nose, just hollow spaces where a face should have been. Its mouth was wide, too wide, and opened in a way that made me feel like I was looking at something that wasn't meant to exist. It moved in jerky, unnatural ways, twitching and shifting, as though it was still figuring out how to control itself. The way it stood there, silent and still, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was as if it were waiting, like it knew we could see it. But it didn't care. It didn't move toward us, not right away. Instead, it just watched us with that empty, hollow face. The air felt thick with a kind of tension I couldn't describe, like something was about to snap. Then, without warning, it made a sound. It wasn't a growl or a scream. It was a distorted version of a laugh, a twisted, mocking cackle that made my blood run cold. And in that moment, I knew. This was no animal, no random creature. It was something else entirely, a skinwalker. Jake was the first to break the paralysis. He shouted something. I can't even remember what, and we all turned and ran. My feet barely touched the ground as I sprinted back toward the camp. I could feel it, following us, moving just at the edge of my vision. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there, but I knew it was close. I knew it was watching, just waiting for the right moment. We didn't stop running until we were back at the car, and even then, we didn't feel safe. The feeling of being hunted stayed with us long after we left that place. It's been years since that night, and I still can't shake the memory of that thing, that creature, whatever it was. Every time I hear an owl in the distance or a coyote howling at night, my heart skips a beat. I know what I saw out there, and I'll never forget it. Something in the desert is waiting, and I've learned not to ignore the old stories. My werewolf encounter. From Lichen729. When this story happened, I was around 10, so the memories might be a little fuzzy. This happened when I was in 5th or 6th grade. Me and my 2 friends, who we'll call Shay and Dan, all wanted to go camping really badly. After months of begging, our parents finally agreed, and we'd be camping somewhere in New Jersey. We drove there and got to the woods. These woods were huge and in the middle of nowhere. The last signs of civilization were an old highway. We found a campsite and set up camp. Everything was going well, until me, Shay, and Dan wanted to go explore the woods. We were stupid 10-year-olds and didn't know the dangers. After some convincing, our parents let us go. At first, it was pretty cool. We even saw a raccoon family. But then it started becoming dark. We decided to head back, but it got dark quick. Everything looked the same. We did have flashlights, but they were cheap and not very good. After a while of walking, we found this old clearing. We sat down on some rocks, and that's when we saw it. Around 10 feet from us, there was this figure. It was furry, and at first, I thought it was a black bear since it was standing on its hind legs. But no, its head was extremely canine. Its fur was blackish, and its eyes a piercing yellow. We bolted out of there screaming. I didn't get that good of a look, but I remember its eyes and face to this day. We ran and eventually found camp again. Our moms swarmed us, hugging us and scolding us for taking so long. We didn't tell them what we saw, just said we saw a bear when they asked why we looked so terrified. To this day, I haven't told anybody, and it took me a while to write this story down. Some won't believe me, and I can't blame them, but the message I hope you take out of this is that we don't know nearly as much as we think about this world. What on earth was that? From Listener. This all happened 5 years ago. Back then, I was the type of person who wouldn't believe until you see it. And now, I might as well just believe. I have heard of all monster and ghost stories in my life. I found them very thrilling. So thrilling that when I had the chance, I would daydream about me in a situation when I would be hunted down by some unknown creatures. I would have to find a way to stop it. My friend, who I will call Larry, was also interested in the paranormal. Me and him would sit around my laptop looking up creepy stories and paranormal creatures. The stories we found grabbed our attention. We would make comments about what we would do if we were in that person's shoes. So I was at my friend's house that day. It was almost evening, and a few cars were driving by since he lived in a remote area. There was a tree line not too far away from his backyard. Me and him would go on walks there, take in the sights and atmosphere of the woods. But little did I know that I would never look at the woods like I used to. It was finally nighttime. Larry was at the sofa watching television. I was on my phone watching some of my favorite videos on YouTube. I was getting tired, so I got up and told Larry that I was going to bed. I have decided to sleep at his house. Larry said okay, and I left to walk up the stairs into one of the rooms he said I could use. Since the bed was very close to the window, I could see the awesome night sky. The moon and stars were like the only ones glowing brightly than the dark silhouettes of the tall trees. My eyes grew heavy, beckoning me to at least close my eyes and fall into a deep slumber. And so I did. I woke up sometime later. It was still dusk. I just couldn't sleep anymore. I didn't know why I couldn't. Whenever I closed my eyes, they would just fly open again, as if refusing to make me sleep. Finally giving in at the fact that I couldn't sleep again, I sat up. Now I didn't know if Larry was sleeping or watching television. He was infamous for watching TV from dusk till dawn. The first thing I did was to look out the window. Still the moon and stars. I saw the woods not too far away. There were lots of deer around here, mind you, and most of them wandered too close to Larry's backyard. And tonight was the night that there was a deer there. It was sniffing around the grass. Larry had a tall gate that surrounded his backyard. I guess for not letting anything in. Anyways, I was staring at this deer for a long time now. That is, until it stopped looking at the grass. Its ears perked up, and it was looking at the tree line. I follow its gaze. The woods were as dark as ever. Couldn't see anything except the tall, dark shapes of the trees. What was this animal looking at? I guessed it was a predator. The deer stood still and silently. It was like the whole area was put under a time-stop spell. I grew worried. I didn't know what this deer was looking at. I had a burning sensation that it was not good. Then the deer dashed away in fright. Then something came dashing out from the tree line. It was some type of animal that I've never seen before. It was all black. So all I saw was a giant black mass charge from out of the trees. It had pointed ears, a long snout that showed dirty teeth. The eyes reflected a bright yellow with small pupils. It was on all fours, so my first thought was that it was a wolf. But nobody had told me that wolves existed in this part, and it was far too large. I watched it walk slowly. Its heavy footsteps pounded the ground. It looked left and right all the while smelling the air. Probably food, probably looking for me. I ducked down and covered myself like a scared child who'd just seen a terrifying monster emerge from out of a closet. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just laid there, praying to God that this creature, or whatever it was, didn't find its way in the house. If it did, me and Larry would be screwed. I woke up again. I knew I slept again because now the sun was up. I was so thankful that it was dawn once again. I jumped off the bed and walked into the hallway, only to hear Larry calling my name from the back door that led to the backyard. I was met by a confused and scared look on Larry's face as he pointed and looked down at something in the grass. "What kind of animal makes tracks this huge?" he asked. My heart sank. These paw prints were in the place where that wolf creature thing was standing the night before. I had to steady my breath so Larry wouldn't notice. Then my friend turned in my direction, looking at something else. "And what kind of animal makes claw marks that deep and long?" he yelled as he motioned for me to look where he was facing. Then my jaw dropped. There were lots of deep claw marks on the back door. This only leaves me to this one conclusion. The wolf monster did try to get inside. Back again. From Listener. This happened recently, and it has to be connected to my experience from 5 years ago. I was in my own house alone. My mother had left to go do some stuff and said she wouldn't be back until 2 hours later. That time I had let her stay in my house because she wanted to visit me. She's still here, though. I was reading my favorite book series, Wings of Fire. I was on the 8th book when I suddenly felt bored and wanted to go outside. Just like Larry's house, my house had a back door and a tree line right behind it. The tree line was very thick, and at night you could barely see a thing unless you have a very bright flashlight with you. There were deer too, and the last time I've been in those woods, I saw a big black bear just walk across the trail I usually follow when I go for walks. So there I was, just walking towards the tree line and off to find my most loved sitting spot against a large tree. I took my book with me also. Once I found my spot, I sat down and began to lay my eyes on the words. The woods were filled with the loud singing of birds. The trees swayed slightly when the wind drifted between them. There was also the occasional sound of scurrying small animals running up trees. I was relaxed until something crossed my mind. I didn't forget the last time I saw that creature. My mind has a habit of making me think that stuff I saw that was perfectly far away from my house was going to stalk me back without me knowing. I hated thinking about it. Thoughts like that always make me anxious, so any chance I had, I scanned my surroundings. So don't think about it then, I would tell myself. But that didn't work. I was deep inside my reading when I was forced by my mind to look around. You know how people say how they were in the woods, and the woods suddenly went dead silent around them? That's how it got for me. One moment, the environment was alive. The next, it's silent like a cemetery. Unnerved, I looked up. Nothing was there. Not even a single animal. Not even a single sound. Only the sound of wind traveling. The noise will come back, I say to myself. Just wait a little longer. Minutes pass. Not another sound came from the air. People have said that once the woods get silent, something big might be lurking nearby. A predator, in that matter. I closed my book and stared into the trees. I did not like this feeling that overwhelmed me. Half of my mind was telling me to run, while the other half told me to stay and see what was stalking around here. That's when I heard a stick crack. The sound was so sudden, I darted my head in the direction in which I heard the sound come from. Nothing was there, or there was something there and I just couldn't see it. Another sound of sticks snapping came from in front of me, so I cranked my head in that direction. "No!" I shout in my mind. This couldn't be happening. I was seeing this same animal I saw before when I was in Larry's house 5 years ago. Stay calm. It hasn't seen you yet. The wolf monster was just emerging from out of some thick brush, the same deep black color, the same yellow eyes, the same everything. Why was it here? Of all the places it could have been, why me? Then it turns its head to me. I freeze. I drop my book, and it falls to the ground with a loud thud. The creature snaps its neck to where the object has fallen. It sniffs the air. The crazed eyes of the thing turn to me. I hate those eyes so much. I couldn't find an opportunity to run and hide from this unnatural animal. It was like I was forbidden from moving. This animal's gaze was keeping me in place. Then I shouted at it. May have been a bad idea, I guess. "Go away!" I shout at the thing. The monster flinches, and then what looks like long spines erupting from its back vibrate. I instantly take it as a threat to stay away from it, and I do the most stupid thing. I ran. Yeah, you're not supposed to run from a predator because it triggers them to chase after you. But when I looked back, the wolf thing just stood there. Yes, it stood there watching me run away from it. Should it be chasing me? Or did it not feel like eating me? Because it could get me if it wanted it. But it didn't, which I am thankful for. When I went back inside, my mother was already in the kitchen putting down all the groceries. She looked at me with this confused look. "Where were you? And why do you look so afraid?" She stares deeply into my eyes. I breathe heavily. "It's nothing, Mother," I say. "Just got chased by a bear. Nothing to worry about." A series of related encounters from The Dark Night. This is a massive compilation of encounters that I have had over many years that I thought were not related. It consists of 7 different encounters and experiences that defy explanation. The most recent occurring yesterday, as of writing this, while the oldest encounter happened in 2017. If you're wondering how I was able to remember all of these details that I'm about to share, I keep a journal of almost everything that happens around our house. To begin, I live in a college dormitory, and although I have had some horrifying, unexplainable events happen to me there, those are stories for another time. The multiple events comprising this encounter occurred on the back deck and the patio beneath the deck of our house. It also includes the area around my mom's raised beds and a field across from a pond that we owned. To maintain anonymity, I'll call my dad Joe and my mom Ruth. It all began on a Saturday in 2017. I think I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. After what I thought was a rigorous day of hard math and English, I sat down at the dining room table, ready to eat. My mom, being an incredible cook, set down a plate of perfectly cooked tacos, freshly cooked beans, and homegrown corn. I began eating ravenously, appreciating my mom's cooking prowess for the millionth time. As I ate, I occasionally glanced out a window to my right to view the beautiful sunset that was underway. At one point in the meal, I looked up and saw a strange shape moving around in the thicket right next to the tree line. It was normal to have coyotes around the area where I lived with my parents. We even heard a wolf occasionally. Let me tell you, wolves are a lot bigger than they portray in shows. However, this mystery animal was huge. Compared to my 6'7" self, I would say it had around 2 feet on me. This was just an estimate since it was far away. I stared at it mid-chew for a good 30 seconds before the thing lumbered back into the woods. I tried to ignore the panic that had unexplainably risen in me as I finished my delicious dinner. After we ate, I told my dad that I saw a large animal of some kind meandering through the thicket next to the trees. "Probably a wolf or coyote, son. Nothing to fear," he said. My dad knew animals, so I agreed with him, my panic subsiding. 3 whole months passed by, and I completely forgot the massive mystery creature I saw during dinner. That was until I saw it again. This time it was on a Friday during dinner again. My mom masterfully whipped up a Caesar salad and set it on the table. I then heard a noise coming from the basement, like a knock on glass. My dad heard it and told me to go see if a bird fatally injured itself by hitting the window, since dead animals close to the house attracted unwelcome visitors. I went to the basement and walked to the 2 French doors. There was nothing in the window, nor any bird on the ground anywhere near the doors. Goosebumps immediately erupted on the skin of my arms and neck, and I felt watched. Doing the smart thing, I turned around and walked towards the stairs that led to the main floor of our house. Then a quiet knock echoed through the basement, seemingly originating from the windows of the French doors. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see something from my nightmares. But again, there was nothing. Looking back on the second encounter, I should have looked upwards, because there was a small cranny above the 2 French doors, where something could have easily hid. I made it upstairs, and my parents were enjoying the salad, oblivious to the second knocking noise. "What did you see, son?" my dad asked. "Nothing. Just a dumb chickadee seeing its reflection," I lied. I later wrote in my journal that I felt guilty for lying, but telling them that a hidden entity was knocking on the door was exponentially less believable. The third encounter was one my dad had. He came back inside from a day on the farm, looking white as a sheet. "What happened, Joe?" my mom asked. She almost never said my dad's name unless she was worried about him. "Saw the strangest thing," he mumbled. "What? What did you see?" I asked, thinking of the French door encounter. "Something was walking round the field across from the pond, and it was tall and real mangled looking," my dad slowly said. "It just slowly moved until it saw me. All at once, it dove into the tall grass real fast, and I could hear leaves and stuff moving as it went away. I don't know what the blazes it was, but it was big and fast." Now, my dad never lies, not even if lying can save him from punishment. So when he told that story, I was shaken deeply. After dinner that day, my dad sat outside, smoking a cigar with a gun in his lap, watching the field he said the creature was in. My mom went outside to sit with him, and they talked for a long time. I never could figure out what they said, but from the look in my mom's eye, I could tell she was terrified. A full 7 months passed before the next 2 encounters occurred. They occurred just 1 day apart. This time, my mom got a good look at the strange creature. Early on a Monday morning, she went outside to water the plants in her raised bed, only to find them all black and withered. She cared about the plants like they were her children, and I can say that they were alive and well on the Sunday before then. Now, they looked as if they hadn't been watered in months. The roses were blackened, and the dahlias were just black stubs on the ground. She was baffled, but also sad to the point of tears. These plants had grown in the raised beds for years and years, and all of a sudden, they all died. The Tuesday after, she went back out to the raised beds to plant new seeds. An hour or so after she left to plant the seeds, she ran back inside, crying and desperate for air. "Joe!" she screamed. "The thing you saw is back!" My dad flew from his home office and gently took her to the bedroom, where they talked for a while. All I could get from the conversation was that Mom was in shock. She couldn't talk coherently for a while before she finally got herself together. Recently, I asked my dad what she told him, and this is what he said. Ruth was putting fertile soil around the seeds to help them grow. At some point, she dug a small hole and was about to drop a seed in when all the woods around her erupted in sounds she ain't never heard before. Screeches, weird chanting, and whispers all round her. I don't know why you and I didn't hear nothing, but I believe her. Then, that tall creature came out of the woods real fast and chased her to the house. She said it was like the thing was directing her away from the plant beds. After he told me about Mom's encounter, he asked me never to talk to her about it since she was still sensitive about the subject. A couple of years went by, and it was 2022 when the next encounter took place, according to my journal. This time we all saw the creature in broad daylight. We had made an unspoken rule to never go to the raised beds unless they were in complete sunlight. It was a Wednesday during my summer break in my freshman year of college, and my now aging dad put me to work tilling a new plot of ground to grow watermelons. This carefully chosen plot of land was roughly 30 feet from the dilapidated raised beds. I began tilling, making rows of mixed fertile earth. It was hard work, but I got it done within 30 minutes or so. While tilling, I had my AirPods in, listening to some hard rock songs. That's why I didn't notice my mom and dad yelling desperately for me until I had finished using the loud tiller. I looked in their direction, pulled out one of my earpieces, and asked, "What?" My dad said nothing, but pointed to the woods behind me. Then he said, "Don't look behind you, son. Just come towards me real slow, all right?" Confused and a little freaked out, I did as he asked, slowly moving towards the patio they were standing on. When I made it to the patio, I turned. God, I wish I didn't. Standing next to the corner of the tilled square of earth was the tall, thin mystery animal. It stood in broad daylight, so I got a good look at it. This is the description I gave in my journal, which had become a log of the encounters at that point, about 15 minutes after the sighting. Had no fur. Dark skin which looked leathery. Its face looked like a person's face but without a nose or ears. Yellow eyes with no iris. Just blackness with a yellow dot in the middle. It just stood there, watching us as if curious. That's when I realized that, where I was standing, it would have been less than 2 feet behind me. Upon making this realization, tears of terror sprung into my eyes, but I tried to stay motionless. Eventually, after what felt like hours of silent observation, the creature turned around and walked away. Wordlessly, we all went inside, took a shower, and reconvened on an old couch in the living room. My dad got right to the point, saying, "We should move." My mother replied, "Joe, that's what it wants. These are all scare tactics. It's trying to scare us away." I understood what she meant. She didn't want to leave because that would mean that the creature would get what it wanted. After some conversation, we decided to stay and see what happened next. If the creature got physically violent, then we would leave. In retrospect, this was probably not the smartest decision, as the creature could have just broken into our house and killed all of us before we had time to leave if it decided to become violent. Then, just yesterday, it came back. This is the final encounter so far. It's not the scariest one, but it was one of the most eerie ones. On a Thursday afternoon, we decided to take a family hike in some of our neighbors' property, with their permission, of course. We hiked for a couple of hours, encountering some rough terrain and steep angles, but it was fun. The hike was promptly cut short by a text that my dad received from one of our other neighbors, which read, "Do you have someone over? There's a real tall man sitting on your patio." After showing my mom and me the text, my dad said, "Let's go." We briskly walked to our car and drove to our house. Sure enough, the creature was just sitting on our porch, motionless. I think it saw us because it quickly stood up and ran into the trees to the left of the house with impossible speed. So yeah, now we've just started the process of moving to another location. If that creature wants us to be gone, then we'll be gone. I've researched it, but couldn't find any description of a cryptid or unexplained entity like it. The closest cryptid I found, based on its physical features, was a wendigo, but I checked, and we don't have any land near us that has been deemed cursed by Native Americans. I really hope that after we move, we'll finally find some rest from this thing. One more thing. The only reason why I was able to describe such a large string of encounters with such detail is due to the log journal that I had. Stay safe. Don't look back. From Madison. This is a true story that happened 5 or 6 years ago. So my friends, Rhiannon, Carmen, and Cadence and I were all sleeping over at Rhiannon's mom's house for the weekend. So this was on a Friday, and we were staying until Sunday night, so we could go back to school the next day. We all got to her mom's house at about 4 p.m., because we all were supposed to bring some type of food to have while we were watching movies and playing games. Now keep in mind that we all lived in a town where nothing much happened, so we could walk around town after 10 p.m. We got there and started playing games and blasting music so loud that her mom had to tell us to go outside and play. But it was way too cold for that to do anything outside. But that didn't stop them. It was about 7:45 p.m. when Rhiannon's mom had told us that she had been requested to go to the hospital for some reason she never told us about. She left, and 10 minutes after she left, we started blasting music again and playing stupid games like Would You Rather and Truth or Dare. Then Rhiannon says, "Hey, my mom won't be back until like 12 o'clock, and we ate all the food, and I'm starting to get hungry. We should go to the gas station and get something." I was a little uneasy about going to the gas station, or anywhere at this time of night. And even though it was 7 o'clock, it started to get dark earlier, and there were woods almost everywhere. Plus, I'm not used to this type of wilderness environment or whatever, because I came from New York City, and there is nothing but buildings and crowded places where it's like you're almost never alone, and you felt safe walking to the store at night. I told Rhiannon that I did not want to go. "Rhiannon, what about if your mom comes back early or something? Wouldn't it be better for me to say that I stayed up and waited for her to come back while you guys went to sleep? Or would you rather her come back nervous as heck because none of us are here?" To be honest, I didn't mean any of that, but I was willing to say anything to stay and not go. "Yeah, you're right, Madison. Okay, you stay here. Anything you want me to bring you back?" Maybe just an Arizona drink and some popcorn. That's all." I gave her $3 and told her to call me if anything had happened. It was about 8:32 now, and they didn't come back, so I decided to call Rhiannon. She didn't answer, so I thought her phone was dead or something. I watched a little TV and waited until they came back. I fell asleep on the couch for about 20 minutes. Then, at about 8:52, I hear loud banging, boom, 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 and yelling, "Open the door, quick, please hurry up!" I jump up in a cold sweat and run to the door and ask who it is. It was them. When I opened the door, I was horrified at what I saw. Rhiannon's hand covered in blood and Cadence's shoe missing. Carmen was just crying so hard you would have thought someone she loved had just died in front of her. "What in the world happened?" I asked. It turns out that when they were walking to the store, they had a feeling that someone was following them. When they turned around to see, they were standing face to face with a very tall man in about his 40s and had a knife in his hand chasing them. Then Cadence tripped and fell and lost her shoe, and right when he was about to stab her, Rhiannon grabbed the knife, and the man had cut her hand, and she grabbed Cadence and ran as fast as they could back to the house. But it doesn't end there. That call her mom got was about a woman who was chased by an older man with a knife and sliced 5 times on her arm and leg. And when the woman tried to get away, the man cut her leg and ran off. Rhiannon decided that she wouldn't tell her mom right away because she didn't want to get in trouble. But 5 days later, she ended up telling her. Her mom asked us if we were okay and called our mom to tell what happened. But all I know is that they never caught the man, and I'm just happy that they are all okay. Thanks for stopping by our little campsite here at Outdoor Terrors. To hear your story on the show, send it to us at darkstories.org. For more scary stories from me, catch me on my other podcasts, Unexplained Encounters and Tales from the Break Room, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Or go to eeriecast.com for those and even more terrifying podcasts. Follow me on X or Twitter at Prevails, and if you don't mind, leave a rating for Outdoor Terrors on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, I'll see you soon when the campfire blazes once again.